I walked into the estate auction uninvited, my boots echoing against marble floors that had seen more money pass through than most people earn in a lifetime. The room smelled like old wealth and expensive perfume. 200 seats faced a podium, where an auctioneer in a crisp suit stood shuffling papers. I found a spot along the back wall, arms crossed, and waited. My ex-wife Callie sat in the front row, her new fiancé Grant beside her wearing a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next piece, Lot 19, a hand-carved Rococo credenza by H.K." The room murmured with interest. Grant leaned over to whisper something to Callie, loud enough for nearby bidders to hear. "This is the kind of craftsmanship you deserve, babe. Real art, not handyman garbage." Laughter rippled through their section. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. Then Callie froze, her head tilted slightly, like she'd heard something wrong. She whispered to Grant, her voice carrying a sharp edge of confusion. The bidding started at $50,000. The room went silent as people turned, sensing drama. Someone near the front asked the question that hung in the air. Who was H.K.? Before the auctioneer could answer, Callie shot to her feet and pushed past Grant toward the backstage entrance. Her heels clicked frantically against the floor. I didn't move. I just watched. Her mother followed close behind, hissing loud enough for the back rows to hear. "How dare you show up here and ruin her new life?" She'd spotted me. Guests turned to look, their expressions shifting from curiosity to anticipation. Grant stood and pointed at me, his voice dripping with contempt. "Security, this man's the handyman ex-husband. He doesn't belong here." The auctioneer paused, uncertain, but before anyone could move, a woman in the third row stood. I recognized her, Patricia Donovan, a private collector I'd worked with years ago. "That man has every right to be here, possibly more than anyone else in this room." The crowd buzzed. Phones came out. Someone whispered that H.K. had been trending at Sotheby's for months, a mystery artisan whose work commanded 6 figures. Grant's confidence wavered. He looked at Callie, who'd returned from backstage pale and shaking. The auctioneer smiled slightly and announced, "Our next piece, Lot 20, another exceptional work by H.K., starting bid, $75,000. I smiled then. Just a little. My name is Howard Kessler, and I was married to that woman for 26 years. 26 years of waking up early to sand wood in a garage workshop while she slept in the house I'd built with my own hands. 26 years of coming home with sawdust in my hair and calloused fingers, greeted by a wife who looked at me like I'd tracked dirt across her clean floors. She never asked what I made in that workshop. I'm 58 now, with gray creeping through my beard and permanent aches in my shoulders from decades of bending over workbenches. I grew up in Vermont, the son of a furniture maker who taught me that wood has a language if you know how to listen. My father died when I was 19, leaving me his tools and a single piece of advice: make things that outlive you. I moved to Connecticut, opened a small workshop, and started taking commissions. That's where I met Callie. She was 24, working at an art gallery, beautiful and ambitious. I was 32, quiet and steady. She said she loved that I worked with my hands. For the first few years, maybe it was true. But somewhere along the way, romantic became embarrassing. My work became manual labor, and I became the husband she stopped introducing at parties. The moment I knew it was over happened 2 years ago at her mother's house during Sunday dinner. Callie's family gathered around a table I'd built myself, though no one mentioned that. Her mother served roast chicken and passive-aggressive comments in equal measure. "Howard," she said, cutting her meat with precision, "when are you going to get a real job? Something with benefits?" Callie's sister laughed into her wine glass. Grant was there too, already circling, even though we were still married. He owned some vague tech startup that seemed to involve a lot of lunch meetings. I set down my fork carefully. "I have a job." Callie's mother smiled. "Manual labor isn't a career, dear. It's something you do until you figure out what you want to be." The table went quiet. I looked at Callie, waiting for her to say something. She studied her plate like it held answers. Then she spoke, her voice soft but final. "Howard doesn't really fit anymore." Her words landed like stones in still water. Her father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Grant smirked. I stood slowly, thanked her mother for dinner, and left without dessert. The next morning, Callie served me divorce papers over coffee. She'd already hired a lawyer, already planned the exit. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed that 26 years could end with so little ceremony. The divorce meeting happened in a conference room with gray walls and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. Callie's lawyer laid out demands like she was ordering from a menu. The house, the car, half my retirement account. My lawyer asked what I wanted. I shrugged. She can have it. Callie looked almost offended by how easily I agreed. We got to the garage contents, and her lawyer waved dismissively. Old furniture, woodworking tools, assorted materials. Mrs. Kessler declines interest in these items. Callie leaned forward. You can keep your little tools, Howard. None of it's worth anything anyway. I thought about the pieces stored carefully in that garage. The credenza I'd spent 3 months carving. The desk, commissioned by a museum in Florence. The dining table a Boston collector had paid $40,000 for, cash, delivered in an unmarked envelope because he wanted anonymity. Sounds fair, I said quietly. Her lawyer made notes. Callie's expression was smug, like she'd won something important. I signed the papers with a pen she'd given me for our 10th anniversary. As I signed my name, I felt the smallest smile pull at my mouth. Her lawyer noticed. Something funny, Mr. Kessler? I looked up. Just thinking about the future. I moved into the back room of my workshop 3 days after the divorce finalized. It wasn't much. A cot, a hot plate, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But it was mine. I slept surrounded by wood shavings and the smell of linseed oil, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. The first week I cleaned, organized, made space. The second week I started building again, not for clients, just for myself. The third week, I walked to the locked cabinet in the corner. I'd installed it myself 20 years ago, fireproof and bolted to the concrete floor. Inside were folders organized by year, each one containing contracts, photographs, shipping receipts, and authentication letters. I pulled out the folder marked 1998 and flipped through carefully preserved documents. A commission for a private collector in Milan. Another for a tech billionaire in Seattle who wanted a desk like the one Jefferson used. He'd paid $90,000. I kept going through the folders. Every piece signed with my initials only. Every payment in cash or wire transfer. Every client bound by non-disclosure agreements because they wanted exclusivity, mystery, prestige. Callie had no idea what she dismissed as worthless junk. I found the letter in the 2019 folder, folded carefully inside a plastic sleeve. The header read, P. Rinaldi and Associates, Fine Art Acquisitions, Rome. I remembered Pietro Rinaldi, a small man with perfect English and an eye for detail that bordered on obsessive. He'd commissioned a credenza based on a 17th century design, hand-carved with scenes from Dante's Inferno. I'd worked on it for 9 months. Every figure, every flame, carved with tools my father had left me. The letter was his final offer, dated 5 years ago. Mr. Kessler, my client is prepared to offer $200,000 for the Inferno credenza, with the understanding that provenance remains private. I'd accepted. The money had gone into a separate account Callie never knew about, used quietly over the years to cover mortgage payments when her spending got out of control. I pulled out the dusty ledgers next, leather-bound books where I'd recorded every sale since 1995. Page after page of international clients, cash transactions, wire transfers from banks in Switzerland and Singapore and New York. For decades, I'd been making museum-quality pieces under initials only. Nobody knew the scope. Not my lawyer, not my accountant, certainly not Callie. I'd kept it quiet because my clients demanded discretion. I started making calls the next morning. Careful, strategic calls to collectors I'd worked with over the years. Patricia Donovan answered on the second ring. Howard Kessler, she said warmly. I was wondering when you'd resurface. We talked for an hour. I explained the situation without emotion. Divorce, assets divided, workshop items retained. I had pieces in storage, photographs, documentation. Was she interested in representation? Her laugh was sharp and delighted. Howard, I've been waiting years for you to go public. How many pieces are we talking? I consulted my ledgers. 42 verified works, various sizes and styles, all authenticated, all documented. Silence on the line, then a whistle. Do you have any idea what you're sitting on? I smiled. I have some idea. We discussed strategy, Anonymous auction at first, build buzz around the HK brand, then reveal selectively. She'd handle Sotheby's connections, authentication verification, legal protection. This could be significant, Howard. Life-changing money. I thought about Callie in the house I'd paid for, wearing jewelry Grant had bought with family money that was running out faster than he admitted. I don't need life-changing, I said. I just need them to understand what they threw away. Patricia's voice softened. Then let's make sure they can't look away. Meanwhile, Callie was living her best life, at least according to social media. I didn't follow her accounts, but mutual friends sent screenshots. Engagement photos in Napa Valley, Grant down on one knee with a ring the size of a small car. House renovation posts showing contractors ripping out perfectly good cabinets I'd installed myself. Captions about new beginnings and finally living the life I deserve. Her mother commented on everything with heart emojis. But I heard things through the grapevine. Grant's startup had burned through its Series A funding with nothing to show. His family money, old Connecticut wealth, was tied up in trusts he couldn't access until his father died. They were living on credit cards and the house equity spending like tomorrow would never come. One afternoon, I got a call from Felix, who ran an antique shop downtown. Howard, weird thing. Your ex-wife brought in a table yesterday, said it was junk from the garage, asked what I'd give her for it. My stomach dropped. Which table? He described it. 6-foot oak dining table, hand-carved legs, custom inlay work. I'd built it in 2007 for a client who'd backed out. What did you tell her? Felix laughed. I gave her $200 and tried not to smile. The table hit the news 3 weeks later. Not mainstream news, but the art world noticed. A viral story on a collector's blog. Mystery artisan HK's rare dining table sells at private auction for $80,000. Buyer anonymous. Provenance traced to Connecticut workshop. The post included photographs. My table, photographed from every angle, the inlay work glowing under professional lighting. Comments flooded in from collectors and dealers, speculating about HK's identity. Callie saw it. I know because Felix called me, laughing so hard he could barely speak. She just stormed into my shop, demanding to know where the table went. I told her it sold. She screamed that it was hers and I had no right. He caught his breath. Howard, she didn't recognize it from the article. She had to have someone send her the link. The irony was perfect. She'd sold my work for grocery money, and it had turned into someone else's treasure. She called the shop 3 more times that day, then showed up in person with Grant. They demanded Felix tell them who bought it, threatened legal action. But the table was gone, sold through a private dealer to a collector in San Francisco. By the end of the week, HK was trending in collector circles. The invitation arrived by courier, heavy cream cardstock, embossed lettering, private collector's dinner, invitation only. Patricia had arranged it, pulling strings I didn't know existed. I wore the one good suit I owned and drove into the city feeling like an imposter. The gallery was all marble and soft lighting, with waiters carrying champagne and people speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Patricia found me immediately. Howard, come meet some people. She introduced me as a very talented artisan who values his privacy, which was code the collectors understood. They circled me politely, asking careful questions about technique and inspiration. One woman, a hedge fund manager who collected American furniture, leaned in close. You're HK, aren't you? I didn't confirm or deny. She smiled. Your work is extraordinary. You could clean house if you ever went public. I spent 2 hours talking about wood grain and joinery methods while drinking sparkling water. These people understood what I did. They valued it. They asked intelligent questions about my process. Near the end of the evening, a dealer named Marcus approached. I represent several high-net-worth clients. If you're considering liquidation of any pieces, I'd be very interested. I pulled a USB drive from my pocket and handed it to him. Liquidation list, I said. 42 pieces. Full documentation. I ran into Grant by accident at a lumber supply store in Bridgeport. I was loading sheets of walnut into my truck when I heard his voice behind me. Well, if it isn't Callie's broke ex-husband. I turned slowly. He stood near a display of power tools, arms crossed, looking pleased with himself. Still playing with wood, Howard? Must be nice having so much free time. People in the store glanced over. I kept loading the walnut, each sheet carefully placed. Grant stepped closer. You know, Callie feels bad for you. Living in that dump workshop, barely scraping by. She wanted me to tell you if you need money, we could maybe help out. He said it loud enough for other customers to hear. My hands tightened on the wood, but I didn't rise to it. That's generous, I said evenly. Tell her I'm managing. He laughed. Managing? Come on, man. You're poor now. Admit it. I looked at him then, really looked. His designer jeans, his expensive watch, his carefully maintained hair, all of it purchased with money that was running out. The walnut sheets I was loading cost $3,000. They were for a commission piece a Boston museum had ordered. But Grant didn't need to know that. I'm doing fine, I said quietly. Better than fine, actually. Signing the auction contract felt like stepping off a cliff. Patricia's legal team had drafted everything carefully. 42 pieces, authenticated and photographed, to be sold over a 3-day event at Sotheby's, New York. My identity would remain anonymous initially. Each piece had provenance documentation, including the original commission letters, photographs of the creation process, and certificates of authenticity from independent experts. The projected minimum value, calculated conservatively, was $3.4 million. I signed my name at the bottom of the contract with the same pen I'd used for the divorce papers. Patricia witnessed it, then shook my hand firmly. This is going to change everything, Howard. I thought about that. Change. For 26 years, I'd lived quietly, building beautiful things in silence, while my wife spent money in my name. I'd convinced myself that the work mattered more than recognition. But sitting in that office, looking at the contract that would expose my life's work to the world, I realized I'd been lying to myself. The work did matter, and so did I. When do we announce? I asked. Patricia smiled. The preview catalog goes out next week. By the time the auction starts, every serious collector in the world will know about HK. She paused. Are you ready for what comes after? I thought about Callie's face when she realized what I'd been all along. Yes, I said. The invitation arrived at my workshop on a Tuesday morning, hand-delivered by someone I didn't recognize. Heavy cardstock, gold lettering. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Callie Morrison and Grant Whitmore. Morrison was her maiden name. She'd taken it back immediately after the divorce. The invitation included a handwritten note from her mother. Howard, you should come see what a real man looks like. It might inspire you to better yourself. I read it twice, feeling anger rise and then settle into something colder. Calculation. The engagement party was scheduled for Saturday night at the country club where Callie's parents were members. The same place where we'd had our wedding reception 26 years ago. I RSVP'd yes, which apparently surprised them because Callie's mother called the next day. Howard, I didn't actually expect you to accept. Her voice carried that familiar condescension. No scene, I promised. I just have something to deliver. I hung up before she could ask questions. The next 3 days, I prepared carefully. Patricia's lawyer had drafted documents I'd need. I had them printed on official letterhead, sealed in an envelope thick enough to feel important. Saturday came gray and cold. I put on my suit and drove to the country club with my heart steady. When I walked into the reception hall, conversation stuttered. I walked straight to Callie and held out the envelope. Congratulations, I said quietly. Callie stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Grant appeared at her shoulder, face already darkening. What is this? He demanded. I didn't answer. Callie's mother pushed through the crowd, hissing, Howard, if this is some kind of stunt. But Callie had already torn the envelope open. Her eyes scanned the first page, and I watched the color drain from her face. The letterhead read, Whitman and Associates, Intellectual Property Law. You are hereby notified that you are not authorized to sell, alter, damage, or otherwise dispose of the following items, which remain the intellectual property and physical ownership of Howard Kessler. Below that, a list. Every piece of furniture in the house she'd won in the divorce. 43 items total, each one photographed and cataloged. Callie's voice came out strangled. This is insane. I stayed calm. Read the next page. She flipped it. A contract clause from the divorce settlement highlighted. Below that, photographs showing every piece had been stored in my workshop before being moved to the house. I'd built them. I'd stored them. Legally, they were mine. Guests crowded closer, whispering. Grant grabbed the papers, reading fast, his jaw working. This is harassment. I shook my head. It's property law. Someone in the back pulled out their phone, recording. Collie's perfect engagement party was becoming a spectacle. Her mother tried to escort me out, but I stood my ground. You'll understand everything when the auction begins. What they didn't know was that I'd been paying the mortgage on that house for years. Not all of it, but enough. When Callie's spending spiraled out of control in 2015, when the property taxes went unpaid and the bank sent foreclosure notices, I'd quietly covered it. Wire transfers from my private account, the one funded by anonymous furniture sales, to collectors who paid in cash. I'd done it to protect my work, but also because some stupid part of me still cared. Callie thought Grant had saved her. His family money, his connections, his promises of a better life. But Grant's money had dried up 2 years ago. Everything they were living on came from credit cards and the house equity I'd helped build. I had the bank statements to prove it, stored carefully in my fireproof cabinet. Grant was reading the bank documentation now, papers I'd included showing anonymous payments that kept the house afloat. His face shifted from anger to confusion to something like fear. He looked at Callie. Did you know about this? She shook her head, tears starting. Her mother pushed forward. Howard, this is cruel. I met her eyes. No, cruel is 26 years of being treated like you're nothing. This is just accounting. I turned to leave. Behind me, Callie's voice cracked, but I kept walking. Grant pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. His face went white. There's an auction, he said. Sotheby's. Next week. Callie's meltdown started before I reached the door. Her voice rose to a shriek that cut through champagne-fueled conversation. You can't do this! That's my house! My furniture! I stopped, but didn't turn around. Grant tried to calm her, his hand on her arm, but she shook him off violently. Don't touch me. This is your fault. Her mother rushed over, attempting damage control, but Callie was beyond reason. Security started moving toward us. I finally turned around. Callie, I said quietly. The room went silent. I never ruined your life. I just stopped funding it. Her mouth opened and closed. Grant held up his phone, his hand shaking. Anonymous seller HK, he read aloud. That's you. I smiled slightly. You'll want to attend. I think there are several pieces you'll recognize. I handed Grant a printed invitation from my pocket. Preview is Tuesday. Auction starts Thursday. Everything's legal, authenticated, and absolutely beyond your control. Callie lunged forward like she might hit me. Her mother and 2 friends caught her. I walked out to the sound of her sobbing, and Grant frantically making phone calls. The evening air was cold and clean. I sat in my truck for a moment, hands steady on the wheel, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Absolute peace. Inside, I could hear shouting. Outside, I could finally breathe. Auction day arrived cold and bright. I woke in my workshop before dawn, made coffee on the hot plate, and watched the sun rise through the dusty windows. By 9, I was dressed and driving toward Manhattan. The Sotheby's building looked exactly like I'd imagined. All glass and prestige, people in expensive clothes moving through revolving doors. Inside, the auction hall was filling fast. Patricia had reserved me a seat in the back, but I stood instead, watching the room arrange itself. Wealthy bidders claimed front row seats. Dealers positioned themselves strategically. Phones were everywhere, people live streaming to clients in Dubai and Tokyo and Los Angeles. I spotted Callie and Grant entering through a side door. Callie's eyes were red and swollen. Grant looked like he hadn't slept. The auctioneer took his position at exactly 10 o'clock. Welcome to our special 3-day event featuring the collected works of the anonymous artisan known only as HK. The first piece rolled out on a wheeled platform. The credenza from Lot 19 will begin bidding at $50,000. A woman in the third row raised her paddle immediately. Then another bid. Another. The price climbed. 75, 100, 150. Callie grabbed Grant's arm, her face a mask of disbelief. At $200,000 the bidding slowed. At $240 it stopped. Sold for $240,000. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood perfectly still, watching my work receive the recognition it had deserved for 30 years. The second piece sold for $300,000. The third for $420,000. By lunch, 8 pieces had moved for a combined $2.1 million. During the break, I watched Callie try to approach Patricia, who smoothly evaded her. Grant made phone calls that clearly weren't going well. The afternoon session started with a piece Callie recognized immediately. A bedroom dresser. Cherry wood with hand-carved drawer fronts depicting forest scenes. She'd used it for 10 years without ever asking where it came from. This exceptional piece, the auctioneer said, comes with full provenance documentation showing it was created in 2007 as a private commission. Bidding started at $75,000. Callie stood suddenly. "Wait, that's from my bedroom. It's mine." The room turned. The auctioneer paused, patient but firm. "Ma'am, I'm afraid that's incorrect. Legal ownership has been thoroughly documented and verified." Patricia's lawyer stood from his seat in the front row. "We have receipts, photographs, and workshop records proving this piece was created by HK. He produced documents, crisp and official. Callie stood frozen, humiliated, while 200 people watched. Grant pulled her back down into her seat, his face bright red. The bidding resumed. The dresser sold for $380,000. Someone in the back whispered loud enough to carry. "Can you imagine using that to store cheap jewelry?" Callie buried her face in her hands. By the evening of day 2, Grant's carefully constructed facade was crumbling. I heard through Patricia that he'd tried to sell a designer watch to cover mounting debts. The pawn shop had called it a replica. Worthless. The discovery sent him spiraling, checking other luxury items, finding more fakes. The car he'd claimed was paid in full? Leased. The investment portfolio he'd bragged about? Mostly empty accounts. The lies were unraveling faster than he could patch them. That night, a business journalist from The Times called Callie for comment on the remarkable story of the ex-husband whose hidden artwork is shocking the art world. The article was already written. Patricia had carefully leaked just enough information to make it newsworthy without revealing my identity completely. Callie reportedly declined to comment, then called back an hour later to scream at the journalist, which naturally made it into the article. The auction continued. Day 3 featured the larger pieces: dining tables, wardrobes, a complete bedroom set. Each piece sold for 6 figures. The crowd grew each day, word spreading about the mysterious HK. I remained anonymous, watching from different positions in the room, letting the work speak for itself. By the final day, the total had exceeded $4 million. Patricia found me during a break. "Howard, they're asking about the final piece." I smiled. "Let them wait." The anticipation was building perfectly. The letter from the IRS arrived at Callie's house on the morning of day 3. I know because Grant called Patricia's office in a panic. The letter outlined an investigation into undeclared high-value gifts and asset transfers. Someone had reported the furniture in their home as potentially unreported income. Patricia's lawyer, acting entirely within legal bounds, had submitted documentation that raised questions the IRS was required to investigate. Callie and Grant had never paid taxes on any of it. Why would they? They thought it was worthless junk. But furniture worth millions, received as part of a divorce settlement, had tax implications they'd never considered. The penalties alone could bankrupt them. Grant tried calling me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. He tried showing up at the auction house, but security turned him away. Finally, he got Patricia on the phone and begged her to make it stop. She listened politely, then said, "Mr. Whitmore, I represent Howard Kessler's artistic interests. Tax law is between you and the federal government." That afternoon, I watched Callie try to call me from a number I didn't recognize. She left a voicemail, her voice small and broken. "Howard, please, we need to talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I deleted it without finishing. Some apologies come too late to matter. That night, the auction hall was packed to capacity for the final piece. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls. I stood in my usual spot and waited. The final piece rolled out on a custom-built platform, draped in black velvet. The room went silent with anticipation. The auctioneer let the moment build, then pulled the velvet away with a dramatic flourish. Gasps echoed through the hall. The cathedral desk stood 6 feet tall, carved from a single massive piece of walnut. Every surface was covered in intricate carvings. Saints and sinners, gargoyles and angels, scenes from medieval manuscripts rendered in 3-dimensional relief. I'd worked on it for 3 years, off and on, between commissions. It was the single finest thing I'd ever made. I'd kept it draped in my workshop, a private masterpiece, waiting for the right moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is the crown jewel of the HK collection. The starting bid is $500,000. Paddles went up immediately. The bidding was fierce and fast. 600, 750, 820, 900,000. At 1 million, the room erupted in applause. The bidding continued. 1.2, 1.5, 1.7. Callie sat in her seat, tears streaming down her face. At 1.8 million, the bidding slowed. At 1.9, it stopped. Sold for $1,900,000. The crowd gave a standing ovation. The auctioneer raised his hand for silence. The artist has agreed to say a few words. Every head turned. I took a slow breath and walked forward toward the podium. I climbed the steps to the podium, feeling every eye in the room on me. The lights were bright and hot. I gripped the wooden edges of the lectern and looked out at 200 faces waiting for me to speak. Callie sat frozen in the third row, Grant beside her looking like he wanted to disappear. Patricia gave me an encouraging nod from the side. I cleared my throat. "My name is Howard Kessler," I said. "I'm HK." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared, recording. "For 30 years I've been making furniture in a small workshop in Connecticut. I kept my identity private because my clients valued discretion and because people respected my work more when they didn't know the carpenter personally." I paused. I was married for 26 years to a woman who never once asked what I made in that workshop, who saw my work as manual labor, something to be embarrassed by. The room was absolutely silent. She divorced me and took the house, the car, half my retirement. I kept the workshop and the junk furniture nobody wanted. I looked directly at Callie. I was never poor. I just never needed to prove myself to people who couldn't see value without a price tag. The crowd erupted in applause. Callie covered her face with her hands. Grant stood abruptly and walked out. I watched him go, feeling nothing. When the applause died down, I stepped away from the podium. The auctioneer shook my hand firmly. The final revelation came 3 days later via certified mail. Callie received it while packing boxes, preparing to move out of the house she'd thought was hers. The letter explained what I'd discovered months ago. The house had been refinanced under my name in 2014 during one of our financial crises. Buried in the refinancing agreement was a clause giving me the right to reclaim full ownership upon settlement of all outstanding debt. The auction proceeds had settled that debt. The house was mine. Legally, completely mine. She had 30 days to vacate. Patricia's lawyer had drafted the notice with care, ensuring every word was defensible. Callie's lawyer reviewed it and called her with the bad news. There was nothing to fight. Her mother showed up at my workshop the next day. I was sanding a new piece when I heard the knock. I opened the door to find her standing there, her usual composure replaced by desperation. "Howard," she said, "please. Callie has nowhere to go." I leaned against the doorframe. "She'll find something. She's resourceful." Her eyes hardened. "Don't do this. Don't be cruel." I thought about Sunday dinners and manual labor comments and 26 years of small cruelties. "I'm not being cruel," I said gently. "I'm just not being convenient anymore." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and left without another word. I watched her car disappear down the road, then went back to my work. I left Connecticut a month later. The house sold to a young couple who loved the woodwork, who asked questions about the built-in shelves and the hand-carved banister. I told them stories about each piece and they listened like it mattered. I used the money to buy a small property in Vermont, near where I grew up. Land with trees and a barn I could convert into a proper workshop. Before I left, I returned to Sotheby's for one final item. It hadn't been part of the auction. Not for sale. A small wooden figurine I'd carved years ago, during a particularly difficult period in my marriage. It was a man kneeling, arms raised, holding something invisible but clearly precious. I'd titled it, Self-Respect. The auction house displayed it in a case with a simple placard, Not for Sale. Created by Howard Kessler, HK, 2016. Patricia arranged for it to remain in their permanent collection. People could see it but never own it. Some things you don't sell. Some things you just live by. I drove north with my tools in the truck bed and my future wide open. In Vermont, I unpacked slowly, setting up my workshop with care. The first piece I built was a simple chair, carved from local cherry wood. I worked on it for 3 weeks. When it was finished, I sat in it on the porch and watched the sun set over mountains. My phone buzzed with messages from collectors, commissions, opportunities. But first, I just sat in that chair I'd built and felt completely, perfectly whole.